On my wedding night, I hid under the bed to prank my husband, laughing silently as I waited for the perfect moment to surprise him. But instead of laughter, I heard whispers. Slowly, careful, intimate. I heard them dancing and talking slowly about the pregnancy, about how she loved my husband, about how she was already 2 months pregnant with his child. The voice wasn't a stranger. It was my best friend. I stayed frozen beneath the bed as my husband assured her that marrying me was never about love. He told her he was only getting married to me because of my inheritance, and once he got it, they would move to the next plan immediately. Every word cut deeper than the last. They thought I was asleep. They thought I knew nothing. They thought they were safe. But I heard it all. So I decided not to scream, not to confront them, not to run. Instead, I chose to play along, step by step, following their plan closely, pretending to be blind to the betrayal, all so I could frustrate every move they made, dismantle their lies, and make them pay for every emotion they destroyed. Because that night didn't end in a prank. It ended in murder. If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight. After the wedding ended, everyone believed the night had gone exactly as planned. The guests left smiling. The music faded. The cameras shut off. To the world, we were officially husband and wife. But inside that room, everything had already changed. I stayed under the bed long after they stopped talking, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid they could hear it. My dress was tangled around my legs. My hands were shaking. Every word they said replayed in my head, again and again. The pregnancy, the inheritance, the plan. I realized something then. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was calculated. They had been planning this long before I walked down the aisle. So when they finally left the room, laughing softly like nothing had happened, I waited. I waited until the door clicked shut. I waited until the hallway went silent. And then I crawled out from under the bed, alone, shaking, but wide awake. That was the moment I made my decision. I wouldn't expose them, not yet. Instead, I would become exactly what they needed me to be. A trusting wife, a smiling bride, a woman who saw nothing, suspected nothing, questioned nothing. Because the only way to stop a plan like theirs was to let them believe it was working. What my husband didn't know was that the very next morning, I took my first step into a game he thought only he was playing. The next morning, I smiled. I made breakfast. I laughed at his jokes. I thanked him for choosing me, and he believed every second of it. I became the wife he thought he had successfully fooled. Soft, trusting, grateful. I asked about his day. I kissed him goodbye. I signed papers he placed in front of me without reading them too closely. Because I already knew what he wanted, and I knew exactly how to give him the illusion of control. While my husband thought he was tightening his grip on my life, I was quietly loosening his. I memorized his routines, the late nights, the sudden business meetings, the calls he took in the car instead of the house, and then, without telling anyone, I hired a private investigator, not to confront him, not to expose him, but to watch, to follow him, to listen, to document every lie he thought was invisible. The investigator showed me what my husband never expected me to see: hotel rooms, cash withdrawals, and meetings that didn't involve business at all. My best friend was still there, always just close enough to deny, but never far enough to disappear. And the more I smiled at home, the more careless they became. They spoke openly. They argued in public. They rushed timelines. They thought the inheritance had already changed hands. They thought I was weak. But every night, alone in bed beside the man who betrayed me, I lay awake listening to my breathing, matching his, pretending sleep. Because I wasn't waiting for proof anymore. I was waiting for timing. What neither of them realized was that the investigator would uncover something that forced me to move faster than planned, and once I heard it, there was no turning back. The call came late at night. My husband was asleep beside me, breathing slow, peaceful, completely unaware that his world was about to shift. The private investigator didn't waste time. He told me they were no longer just talking about the inheritance. They were planning around it. There were recordings, quiet conversations captured in parked cars and hotel hallways, messages that were never meant to be read, and timelines that no longer matched the lies I had been telling myself. They weren't waiting for the money anymore. They were discussing what would happen if the inheritance took too long, what could be done to speed things up, what risks were acceptable. That was when I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just being used, I was in the way. The investigator showed me proof that my husband had taken out new insurance policies, quietly, efficiently, without ever mentioning them to me. Policies that only paid out under very specific circumstances. Accidents, unforeseen events, tragedies no one could plan or prove. And then came the detail that shattered whatever denial I had left. My best friend wasn't just pregnant. She was pressuring him to act faster, pressuring him to stop pretending, pressuring him to choose her and the child over patience. Every message pointed to the same conclusion. If I didn't move first, I wouldn't get another chance. I sat in my car long after the call ended, staring at nothing, realizing the game had changed completely. This was no longer about betrayal. It was about survival. And what I decided to do next would place me inside their plan, right at the center of the danger they never saw coming. After that night, I stopped hesitating. If they were already planning my future without me, then I would place myself exactly where they thought I was safest. I became more generous, more trusting, more willing to talk about money. I mentioned timelines. I spoke openly about paperwork. I even joked about how relieved I was to finally have someone handling everything for me. And my husband watched closely. He asked questions he pretended were casual. He offered solutions I never requested. He started making decisions before I finished my sentences. That's how I knew I was doing it right. Behind the scenes, the investigators stayed close, tracking movements, documenting meetings, preserving every conversation that crossed a line they couldn't step back from. Meanwhile, my best friend reappeared in my life as if nothing had changed. She checked on me, touched my arm, asked about my marriage. Her hand always rested on her stomach when she smiled. And I smiled back. I invited her over, included her in plans, let her believe she was still invisible. Because the closer I pulled them in, the more confident they became. They started talking freely again. They stopped checking over their shoulders. They believed the hardest part was already over. What they didn't realize was that I had already given the investigator permission to hand everything over the moment things crossed from betrayal into something darker. I wasn't waiting for them to finish their plan anymore. I was waiting for them to expose themselves. And they did, on a night they thought was perfectly controlled, a night that ended with sirens, shattered trust, and a truth no one could undo. Weeks passed after the wedding.
Weeks of smiling, weeks of pretending, weeks of letting the investigator quietly follow every step my husband took. By then, I knew everything. I knew where they met. I knew how long the affair had really been going on. I knew the pregnancy wasn't an accident, and I knew the plan wasn't just about money anymore. The investigator warned me not to confront them. He told me to let the evidence speak. But there are moments when evidence isn't enough. I asked my best friend to meet me, alone. No accusations, no raised voice, just the truth. She didn't deny it. She told me she loved my husband. She told me the baby was his. She told me I was never meant to stay in the picture for long. She said it calmly, like she was talking about someone else's life. Something inside me snapped. What happened next lasted seconds, but destroyed every future I could have had. By the time it was over, my best friend was gone, and there was no undoing it. I went home afterward. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I walked into the house where my husband was waiting, confident, unaware, already rehearsing his next lie. I told him I knew everything. The inheritance, the pregnancy, the plan to move on once I was no longer useful. He didn't apologize. He got angry. He told me I ruined everything, that I forced his hand, that none of this would have happened if I had just played my role. That confrontation ended the same way the first one did. When authorities arrived, there was no mystery left to solve, only consequences. I'm telling you this now from a place where time no longer moves forward for me. I was convicted, sentenced to life imprisonment. I lost my husband, I lost my best friend, and I lost myself. But what the court never truly answered was whether I was a monster or the final casualty of a plan that had already decided my fate.
After the arrests, everything slowed down and sped up at the same time. Days blurred into interrogations. Nights were spent replaying moments I could never change. Investigators didn't see a betrayed wife. They saw a crime scene. The private investigator's evidence became part of the case, but not in the way I thought it would. It explained motive. It explained fear. But it didn't excuse what I had done. In court, every relationship I trusted was reduced to exhibits and timelines. My husband's affair was laid bare. The pregnancy was confirmed. The inheritance plan was proven to be real. The prosecution didn't deny any of it. They simply said none of it justified what happened next. My best friend was described as a victim. My husband was described the same way, and I was described as the common denominator. They played recordings, read messages aloud, showed the jury how long I had known and how I chose not to walk away. When it was my turn to speak, I told the truth. I told them about hiding under the bed, about hearing my life reduced to a transaction, about weeks of pretending while waiting for proof that my life was in danger. I told them I didn't plan to destroy anyone. I told them I just wanted the truth to stop hurting. The courtroom was silent when I finished, but silence doesn't mean mercy. The verdict came quickly. Guilty. The sentence came after. Life imprisonment. No appeals to emotion, no sympathy strong enough to change the outcome. I was led away while strangers whispered about what they would have done differently. And maybe they're right. But the question that still follows me into every sleepless night is this. If I had walked away the moment I heard their plan, would anyone else still be alive today? If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight. Life doesn't end the day you're sentenced. It just becomes smaller. The walls don't move. The doors decide when you sleep, and time stops meaning what it used to. I wake up every morning knowing exactly where I am and why. There are no wedding photos here, no reminders of who I was supposed to become, only memories that replay whether I invite them or not. I think about the girl who hid under the bed that night, the girl who thought love was real, the girl who believed betrayal would hurt, but never imagined it could kill. People ask if I feel regret. I do, not just for what I did, but for what I ignored. The signs, the silence, the moment I chose to listen instead of leave. I lost my husband, I lost my best friend, and I lost every future version of myself in a single chain of choices. Nothing about this story is a victory. It's a warning. Because sometimes the most dangerous moment in your life isn't when you're being lied to. It's when you finally hear the truth and don't walk away. If you'd heard what I heard under that bed, would you have left immediately, or would you have stayed long enough to let it destroy you too?